Ladies and gentlemen, we have today Professor Marquardt, who just finished a workshop today on leading with questions with PQM consultants in Indonesia, Jakarta in particular. I hope you've enjoyed your stay here and enjoyed the session today.
It was great being in Indonesia, Jakarta, and I felt this was a spectacular group of attendees, and I know they had a great day and they improved their ability to ask questions.
I think we have learned a lot from our session today, and
good.
I think we need to practice leading with questions in our daily lives.
Right, I agree.
Yes. So for the benefit of those who didn't come to the event, I think I have a question.
Sure.
Describe the importance of asking questions and why it is important in our enterprise today.
Okay, for me, I think the most important question, the most important skill in life for any individual, and particularly for a leader, is their ability to ask great questions. The better their questions, the more they will lead their organization, help their organization be successful. And I think particularly in today's environment, because the change is so rapid, the competition is growing, customers and citizens are expecting more, I think every organization, every enterprise must create a culture that asks questions, because the more questions, the better questions they ask, the more innovative that organization is going to be, the more it will become a learning organization, the more successful it will be. So I'm ready to boldly proclaim that the better the questions that an organization has, the more successful it will be, and the more happy and satisfied their employees and customers will be.
So we did have a session today, and there was a lot of questions about leading with questions.
Yes.
But I also noticed that a lot of people were saying this is very new to a lot of the companies, especially in Indonesia.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how do we best start making this as a norm in our enterprises, especially in Indonesian settings?
Yes. Okay. Well, many cultures, not only Indonesian culture, but I think many Asian cultures and U.S. culture where I'm from, cultures tend to discourage questions. Inside the organization, leaders are expected to have the answers. Decisions that have been made continue, and if you ask questions, you're considered an unhappy employee. If a leader asks a question, it more or less demonstrates they don't have the answers, they're not a good leader. And I think in the last 10 years we realized that we have to change that culture, that we have to encourage questions. So I think one of the most important things a leader can do is to encourage questions and ask his employees or her colleagues, ask me questions. I'm going to have to ask you more questions. The only way we can solve the many challenges we have in a creative way to get them solved more quickly is we have to ask each other questions. So certainly leaders have to take leadership. They have to demonstrate the power of questions, and they have to encourage people to ask questions. They have to ask more questions themselves. But I think most cultures, most people, they're afraid to ask questions unless the leader says, we need to ask each other questions. It's okay to ask me questions. If you ask me questions, I will become a better leader, and we together can make our organization a more successful organization.
So it has to start from the leaders.
I think it's important to start from the leader. Now, it can start from any individual. A person can be courageous and say, now in my organization or my department or my group, I'm going to ask questions. Or I'm going to go to my boss and begin asking questions, say, is it okay I ask questions, or can we have more questions? So it can start from anyone, any place, and it has some impact. But if I think a leader does it's in many cultures, unless the leader encourages it and models it, it's hard for someone to take the initiative themselves.
How long do you think that an enterprise or a company trying to have this kind of habits of leading with questions and questioning each other, questioning one another? Mm-hmm. How long do you think that would be? That would kind of create to be a habit.
Right.
To foster continuous improvement.
Right. In some organizations, it may be already too late for them to become a questioning culture because their competitors have passed them by, the environment has changed. So organizations really have no choice. If they want to be innovative, they want to create new products and services that are relevant, they have to ask questions. And so sometimes the environment is forcing leaders who don't want to ask questions to begin asking questions, because questions is the only way they can understand their environment, develop more innovative products and services. So it depends on a number of elements cause how quickly an organization changes. I think if the environment really forces the organization to become more innovative, to be more cost effective, that's going to force the organization to become a learning, leading, questioning organization more quickly. And leaders have to recognize that the environment requires questions. My sense is that most of us, we are born natural questioners. When we leave the organization and go outside the door and meet with our friends, we ask questions. So we enjoy questions. We know questions help us develop relationships, help us to learn. But when we go inside the door of the organization, we stop asking questions. So I think if the internal environment of leaders encouraging questions and the external environment says you've got to ask questions or you don't succeed, it can happen quite quickly. And I'm aware of organizations that within a few weeks or months they change their culture. They begin rewarding people who ask questions. They begin recognizing, encouraging questions. So the quickest way to change the culture is the reward system has to encourage questions rather than statements.
So what's your advice to those companies that you think are a little too late to have such habits?
Well, I think if they start reading the environment, they realize we have to become a questioning environment as soon as we can. We have to be a learning organization. We have to be creative. We have to do better products in shorter time, more tailored, more cost effective for our customers or citizens. And so I believe that questions are so powerful, and once the spirit begins, I think people like to ask questions, and we do it when we are with our colleagues and friends, and all we need is a little bit of encouragement. We need a little bit of practice. We need some modeling and respect and encouragement of questions and recognition and reward for questions that, okay, you're a good questioner in our organization, you helped us be more creative, we will reward you for that because your questions are more valuable to the organization than the other things you do for us. There's probably nothing more valuable to our organization than a great question you might ask us.
So this is a follow-up question to that. This is probably a really good follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
But someone asks, how do we actually change habits of disempowering questions?
Yeah. Well, I think the way you change any habit, disempower, and many of us, we do ask questions, but they're questions that are that cause us to lose power, or disabling questions, make us feel guilty, or not very worthy, not very good. And so most of us, we don't realize that we're asking these disempowering questions, because those are the questions we heard from our parents. Those are the questions we heard from our teachers. Why don't you do this? Why are you so bad? Why can't you? And so forth. And so we are not aware that those are the questions we ask, or the impact of those questions. So I think the first step, if I am aware of the fact that when I ask questions, they're somewhat disempowering, they cause fear or rejection or lack of confidence. And all I have to do, it's a fairly simple process to turn a disempowering or a negative question to a positive. So instead of asking, why are you so bad, or why can't you do it right, you ask, what could you do better? What are some ways in which together we can, achieve this? So it's a mindset, but it's a fairly simple process to just remember that instead of asking questions which put people down, I'm going to ask people questions that will be positive, empowering, and lift them up and make them more creative.
Sometimes I find people don't even realize that
Yes.
their questions are is empowering.
Yes.
How do you make people realize that
Well, as I mentioned,
their habits are?
as I mentioned in the workshop today, if you're going to change your leadership and you're going to be a more powerful, beneficial leader to your organization, you have to ask better questions. And so I think the first step for any change is to find out what questions you are asking. Look at your own questions, reflect on them. You might ask people around you, what kinds of questions am I asking? So you become aware of the fact. And then you deliberately and consciously say, okay, now normally I would ask this question in this situation. I'm going to ask it in a more positive, empowering way, appreciative inquiry, try to get the positive, to get the future, to get the growth, rather than to condemn the negative in the past.
You mentioned that questions are more powerful than statements. Are there techniques that we can all learn to change, the way we make statements, our habits to make statements instead of questions? Right.
Well, I think all corporate cultures, all national cultures, tend to encourage statements. People have been promoted in life because they made better statements than other people. They had the answers and so forth. And so we are encouraged to make statements. And when we do ask questions, it's kind of a judging, condemning type of question where we demonstrate our superiority. And so we have to, as Peter Drucker said, who's one of the great management theorists, said that, in the past, leaders led by statements, by the knowledge, power they had. But that's the leader of the past. The leader of the future, once we entered the 21st century, about 15 years ago, the leader of the 21st century and hereafter will be a leader who can ask questions. No longer can a leader be a teller, because that doesn't work anymore. It worked in the 20th century, but the 21st century, all the great leaders and all the successful leaders are going to be those that lead with questions rather than lead with statements.
This is my last question.
Okay.
And it's actually from us.
Okay.
What do you think is the most memorable questions? By whom and why?
During the course of the day or in my life?
In your life.
Well, as I mentioned during the workshop, certainly I have been asked great questions that changed my life. One simple question where someone said, "Why didn't you write a book?" And that had to be asked several times, and eventually it led me to write 25 books, and that question has enabled me to reach millions of people around the world. My wife was asked the question what she really wanted to do in life, and it changed her whole career.
But for yourself?
Questions I've asked others.
What's the most memorable question that has been asked to you?
Well, one about the writing. I think, like many people, a question I've been asked is, what do you really want to accomplish in life? What do you want to be your legacy? What do you want to be known for? And so like many of us, there's many choices. And a choice I made is that I did move from being in a corporate world.
Questions.
Pardon?
Those are not easy questions.
No, they aren't easy questions. But I moved. I recognized that moving into the academic, I had the opportunity of deeply influencing many people with their research, their questions, so forth. So being a teacher was, a career choice, that would be at a university. And deciding to move in the area of leadership development, and my passion has been questions, and working in the area of action learning, which is the use of questions to solve problems, to develop leadership, to build teams.
Thank you, Professor Marquardt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this time and interview.
Okay.
This marks the end of our interview with Dr. Marquardt. After the PQM Consultants International Seminar in Jakarta, Indonesia. We hope you have enjoyed the talk that we had. And we hope that we'll see you again next year. Maybe we'll see you again sometime.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to coming back to Indonesia and working with PQM.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.